The Man in the Slanted Hat. Friends, welcome back to Dark Vibes Official, and I am your friend, Raj. Today, I have brought a story which will not only bring sleep to your nights, rather it will also add a coolness to your morning teacup. Because fear is not just what is visible in front of the eyes. Fear is also what is behind you, secretly breathing. So get comfortable, dim the lights a bit, and come with me to a world where the man in the slanted hat is waiting for you. The first time Arin saw the Hat Man, he was 7 years old. It was a still, hot summer night, the kind where the air felt like warm velvet. He'd woken, or dreamed he'd woken, unable to move, a crushing weight on his chest. At the foot of his bed, framed by the faint blue light of a street lamp filtering through the blinds, stood a tall, impossibly thin silhouette. Its edges seemed to bleed into the darkness, but its head was crowned by the distinct, sharp outline of a wide-brimmed hat, slanted downward. No face, just a deeper shade of night where a face should be. It didn't move, it simply watched. Arin tried to scream, but his lungs were stone. He felt a cold that had nothing to do with temperature, a dread that was ancient and personal. Then, as suddenly as it began, the pressure released. He gasped, tears hot on his cheeks, and the shadow was gone. Childhood sleep paralysis, the doctor said, a common hypnagogic hallucination, the mind playing tricks in the twilight between sleep and wakefulness. Arin, over the years, learned to believe it. He filed the Hat Man away with other childish fears, the monster under the bed, the thing in the closet. He grew up, became a journalist for a mid-sized digital magazine, The Viridian Query, specializing in debunking modern myths and paranormal claims. Rationality was his shield and his tool. Which is why the Echo Park Hat Man file landed on his desk with a dismissive thud from his editor, Maya. She sipped her espresso. Local legend gaining traction online. 3 separate incidents in the last 2 months. People claiming to see a shadow figure with a hat before bad things happen. Probably copycat hysteria, but it's got the neighborhood forums buzzing. Go poke around. Give us The Psychology of Mass Hysteria piece. Arin skimmed the initial report. A retired librarian, Ilara Vance, found dead in her apartment of an apparent heart attack. Neighbors mentioned she'd been anxious, complaining of a tall man in her hallway at night. A college student, Benji Torres, jumped from his dorm roof in a suspected suicide. His diary contained frantic sketches of a faceless man in a hat and the words, "He wants the silence." Most recently, a night shift nurse, Marcus Chen, was discovered catatonic in his locked car. He'd been mumbling about the man with the slanted hat before he stopped speaking altogether. Coincidence, stress, shared cultural tropes. The Hat Man was a known sleep paralysis archetype after all. Easy article. Echo Park, however, had a different atmosphere. The neighborhood, once bohemian, now hung in a liminal space between gentrification and decay. Arin's apartment, for the duration, was a cramped studio in a building that creaked like an old ship. His first interview was Sheila, Ilara Vance's neighbor, a woman with kind eyes and nervous hands. She wasn't a fanciful woman, our Ilara, solid as a rock, but the last week she jumped at shadows, said she'd wake up and he'd be in the corner of her room. Not a dream, she insisted. She was awake. She described the hat perfectly, a fedora, she thought, tilted down. Did she smell anything? Feel anything strange? Arin asked, his pen hovering over his notebook. An old, dormant part of his brain prickled. Sheila looked up surprised. Yes, she said the room would smell like burnt wires, ozone like after a storm, and a cold spot. Why? common sensory elements in sleep paralysis," Arin said smoothly, the clinical phrase a balm. "The brain can simulate all sorts of sensations." The next lead was Benji Torres's roommate, Leo. He was reluctant, hollow-eyed with grief. "Benji was an artist," Leo said, showing Arin a sketchbook. The pages were a storm of charcoal, and there, repeated obsessively, was the figure. Sometimes just the hat floating in a smear of black, sometimes the full, gaunt silhouette. The rendering was unnervingly consistent, the exaggerated thinness, the hat's precise, slanted angle. It was also, Arin realized with a slow internal chill, exactly as he remembered from his own childhood. "He said it started after he pulled an all-nighter," Leo whispered. "Said the Hat Man didn't just watch, it leaned in. Benji said it was feeding on something, on his fear at first, then on his peace, his hope. He called it harvesting the quiet. I thought he was having a psychotic break. Now, I don't know." Arin's rational fortress developed its first crack. The details were too specific, too consistent across unconnected individuals. Ozone, the slanted hat, the harvesting of peace, a poetic way to describe the suffocating dread of paralysis. That night, in his temporary apartment, Arin dreamed, not of the Hat Man, but of his 7-year-old self lying frozen, the shadow at the foot of the bed. He woke with a start, drenched in sweat, to the distinct smell of ozone. He sat bolt upright, heart hammering. The room was empty, the smell faded, an olfactory memory triggered by the investigation. Pareidolia, his mind supplied, confirmation bias. The final visit was to the long-term care facility where Marcus Chen now resided. Marcus sat by a window, utterly still, his eyes open but seeing nothing. A young doctor spoke with Arin.
Catatonia. Clinically, it's a withdrawal from external reality. We don't know the trigger. His vitals are fine, but his brain activity shows patterns akin to deep, persistent terror. It's as if his psyche just switched off to survive. Did he say anything else? About the Hat Man? The doctor frowned. Before he stopped speaking entirely, he said one more thing. He said, "It's not a man, it's a door, and the door is always hungry." Arin felt the crack in his rationality widen. A door. Not a monster, but an aperture. Something that allowed passage. For what? That evening, he pored over his notes, the streetlights outside his window casting long, shifting shadows across his wall. The article was supposed to be a debunking. Instead, he was compiling evidence for something he refused to believe. Frustrated, he went for a walk through the quiet streets of Echo Park. The park itself was dark, the lake a sheet of black glass. As he walked past a row of dense shrubs, a movement caught his eye. He turned. Under a flickering lamp at the edge of the path, for a fraction of a second, stood a tall, thin shadow. The light from above should have illuminated its features, but it seemed to absorb the illumination, remaining a solid cutout of darkness. And on its head was a broad-brimmed hat, slanted sharply downward. Arin's breath caught. He blinked. It was gone. A trick of the light and his overactive imagination. A shadow cast by a tree. He forced himself to walk home, his pace brisk, the back of his neck tingling. Back in his apartment, he tried to work, but the silence felt thick, expectant. He decided to take a shower, to wash off the unease. The bathroom was small, steamed quickly. As he stood under the hot water, he heard a faint click. The bathroom doorknob. He wiped the fog from the glass door and peered out. Through the veils of steam, he saw the silhouette of a man standing just outside the shower curtain. The outline of a wide-brimmed hat was unmistakable against the frosted glass of the bathroom window. Terror, pure and primordial, locked his joints. He was not asleep. He was wide awake. The ozone smell filled the tiny room, sharp and electric. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The figure outside didn't move. It just stood, a sentinel of silent observation. Then, The shower curtain rattled softly on its rings. It was enough to break the spell. Arin let out a choked cry, fumbling to shut off the water, yanking the curtain back. The bathroom was empty. The door was still closed. The only sound was the drip of the faucet and his own ragged panting. But on the fogged-up mirror, 2 long, thin streaks had been wiped clear, as if someone, or something, had stood close, peering in. Rationality shattered. The next 48 hours passed in a sleep-deprived haze. Arin stopped trying to write the article. He was now the subject. He researched furiously, not as a journalist but as a survivor. He found forums, testimonies from people across the globe who had seen the same figure, awake or asleep. Many spoke of preceding trauma, of deep loneliness, of feeling thin. They described the ozone smell, the crushing cold, the feeling of being drained. Some called it a demon, a shadow person, an interdimensional being. Marcus Chen's words echoed, "It's a door." Arin's own childhood was marked by his parents' bitter divorce, a time of profound fear and instability. The Hat Man had appeared then. Ilara Vance was recently widowed. Benji Torres was struggling with academic pressure and isolation. Marcus Chen worked grueling, soul-wearying night shifts. Were they all thin? Were their emotional defenses worn down, making them visible? Vulnerable? The Hat Man, he began to theorize, wasn't a predator that hunted. It was a scavenger. It drew to the psychic residue of despair, to the silent, cold spaces grief carved out in a human soul. It didn't cause the heart attack or the jump from the roof. It fed on the anguish that made those outcomes more likely. It harvested the quiet, as Benji said. It leached hope, leaving behind a vacuum that could only be filled with nothingness or self-annihilation. And it was here, for him. His sleep became a battleground. He fought to stay awake, drinking bitter coffee until his hands shook, but exhaustion always won. The paralysis returned with a vengeance. Now the Hat Man wasn't just at the foot of the bed, it stood beside it. It leaned over him, the void where its face should be feeling like an open pit. The cold was so intense, it felt like burns on his skin. The ozone smell was constant, lingering in his apartment even in daylight. He found clues in his own research, whispers of defense. Light, sound, connection. The Hat Man thrived in silence, in isolation, in the dark. Arin started sleeping with every light on, a talk radio station playing softly. It helped a little. The visits grew less frequent, the figure remaining at a distance, a silent watcher from the corner. But he was eroding. He was becoming thin. The constant fear was eating him from the inside, creating the very emptiness the thing desired. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a scanned diary entry from Ilara Vance, provided by a tidy cousin. In her elegant script, she described not just the Hat Man, but a place. She felt it was drawn to a particular spot near the old abandoned Echo Park pumping station, a place that always felt wrong. She'd gone there during the day, a foolish attempt to face her fear. She described a sense of profound emptiness, a hole in the world, and a faint, perpetual smell of ozone.
Arin knew what he had to do. He couldn't run. It was in his head, a part of his history. To be free, he had to confront it, not in his bedroom, but at its perceived source. He had to close the door. He went at dusk, a time of thresholds. The old pumping station was a brick hulk, covered in graffiti and ivy. Behind it, the ground sloped down to a concrete drainage channel, dry and littered with debris. The air here was still and heavy, and there it was, the sharp, metallic tang of ozone. His heart was a drum against his ribs. This was madness, but the memory of the shower, of the thing in his mirror, of a lifetime of fear, propelled him forward. "I know you're here," he shouted, his voice echoing falsely in the concrete basin. "You've been following me since I was a boy. Well, here I am. Come on." Nothing happened. The dusk deepened into night. A streetlight buzzed on above, casting a sickly yellow pallor. He felt foolish, exhausted. Had he really expected a dramatic showdown? Then the temperature dropped. It was sudden, a plunge into a deep freeze. The ozone smell became overpowering, stinging his nostrils. From the deep shadow of the pumping station archway, it emerged. It did not walk. It unfolded from the darkness, becoming solid. Tall, thin, a study in negative space. The slanted hat, the featureless void beneath it. It stood 20 feet away, and its presence was a physical weight, a scream trapped in silence. Arin's legs threatened to buckle. The old paralysis tried to claim him, the crushing weight on his chest. But he was not in bed. He was on his feet, and he was furious. "You're not a demon," he yelled, the anger burning through the cold. "You're a parasite. You feed on what's already broken. You're nothing but a shadow." The figure didn't move, but Arin felt a new sensation, not just cold, but a pulling, a sucking sensation deep in his mind. Memories of his parents fighting, of childhood loneliness, of adult failures began to surface, not as recollections, but as raw, open wounds. The Hat Man was feeding. It was harvesting his quiet, his peace, amplifying his pain to drain it. This was how it worked. It didn't kill you. It made you want to kill yourself. But Arin had spent days researching, thinking. A door worked two ways. If this thing could draw sustenance from human despair, could a human force something else back through it? Not light, that was a barrier, but something more fundamental. Connection, the antithesis of its feast. Clenching his fists, he did the hardest thing he'd ever done. He stopped fighting the memories. Instead, he embraced them. He thought of his mother's laugh, rare but bright. He thought of his father teaching him to ride a bike. He thought of Maya's trust, of Leo's grief for his friend, of Sheila's kindness. He thought of the simple, stubborn will to live that had carried him through every lonely night. He focused not on the pain the Hat Man was amplifying, but on the love and connections that existed in spite of that pain. He poured every ounce of that feeling, not as a shield, but as a spear, a torrent of messy human warmth aimed directly at the cold, silent void. The first time, the Hat Man reacted. It seemed to waver like a mirage. The absolute blackness of its form rippled. A sound emerged not through the air, but inside Arin's skull, a high, thin static, a scream of empty space. The pulling sensation intensified, then stuttered. The cold became chaotic, lashing out. "You're not welcome here," Arin screamed, advancing a step, his entire being a focused beam of defiant life. "This pain is mine. This joy is mine. You get nothing." He took another step. The static screech rose to an unbearable pitch. And then, with a silent implosion that Arin felt in his bones, the figure collapsed in on itself. It didn't vanish. It unmade, folding backwards into the archway shadow from which it came. The ozone smell vanished, replaced by the damp, mundane scent of concrete and weeds. The crushing weight lifted. The deep psychic cold was gone. Arin slumped to his knees, gasping, tears streaming down his face. He was empty, but it was a clean emptiness, like after a storm. The fear was gone. In its place was a profound, weary peace. He never saw the Hat Man again. His article for the Viridian Query was titled "The Shadow in the Mind, Echo Park and the Power of Suggestion." It was a masterful work of debunking, citing shared cultural archetypes, the effects of stress, and the power of suggestion in close-knit communities. It was convincing, rational, and a complete lie. Arin praised it. Readers found it satisfying. The online chatter about the Echo Park Hat Man slowly died down. Arin knew the truth.
The Hat Man was real, not as a monster from another dimension, but as a manifestation of a specific, terrible kind of loneliness, a psychic scavenger that grew fat on silent despair. It existed in the liminal space, a door that could only be opened from the inside by human suffering. He still sleeps with a small light on. He makes a point to call a friend every day. He cultivates noise, life, connection. He nourishes his own spirit, keeping it thick, resilient, opaque. Sometimes, on the edge of sleep, he might catch a faint whiff of ozone or feel a momentary chill. But he simply turns on his side, thinks of a happy memory, and reminds himself that doors, once you understand how they work, can be kept firmly shut. The man in the slanted hat only visits those who have already begun to invite him in. Friends, the story is over, but the questions probably still remain. How did you feel about this story? Have you ever encountered such a stranger? Have you felt a sense of alienation? Please share your experiences in the comments section, because this channel has survived because of your words. If you like original dark stories, be sure to subscribe to Dark Vibes Official, and also press the bell icon so you're the first to be notified when new stories like this come out. That's all for today. Thank you, and remember, voices in the dark only sound strange when you're not alone.